Hello, welcome to season 3, episode 15 of #psychotherapyunfogged. As you know, I'm Mark Fielding, psychotherapist and relationship counsellor, and your host. Today, we'll be talking about transpersonal psychology and much, much more, an area that I am really, really interested in. So it should be a really, really good interview today. Just to mention that the season finale will be next week now. We're going to get Joe on, as we've talked about for the last few episodes, to talk about his film projects and some exciting news about what we're going to do with season 4. But let's not waste any more time. I'd like to introduce you to the creative catalyst and gatekeeper of Mysterym, Mary-Rita McGuire. Thanks for coming on, Mary-Rita.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Mark.
Great. Really, really good to have you on. Let me just kick off and just ask you a little bit around and share as much or as little as you'd like around personal experiences that kind of led you into working in the field.
Okay, yeah, great. I would say, anyone that kind of comes into this field has got some of their own wounds that present themselves. And my wounds come from childhood. They come from a difficult childhood, not getting a chance to finish school and having to really trust a more unconventional route to adulthood. And that fascinated me, that sense of, well, I didn't complete high school, I didn't have those kind of traditional rites of passage. And suddenly I was really interested in that world, and especially those wounds, that what it means to become an adult and how painful that is, how painful the journey from, an adolescent to an adult can be, especially if there are no gatekeepers or no signposts. And that's where it started, really, that sense of wanting to support young people through their journeys in a way that I found support. So when I left school and I kind of went on a more unconventional journey, certain people came into my life that really supported my choices and could see me and didn't try to put me in a box and didn't try to get me to be, follow the routine or the regulations. They trusted where I was and they could see me. And thanks to those people, I had so many doors open to me in that I ended up in college when I was 14 years old, which to me was always like this really bizarre moment of meeting the lecturer of performing arts and him saying, I know you're only 14, but we're still going to treat you exactly the same as everybody else. You still have to do the work. And that was just a key moment for me of being brought into a tribe of people that understood me. And I felt for the first time a real sense of belonging.
Yeah, and I think the belonging and being seen, I think is so important. I think just kind of segueing into the therapy world, I think a lot of people, we do all kinds of things in psychotherapy, but for a lot of people, I think it can be the first time they've ever been seen, and that in itself, I think, is tremendously healing, really. And I think, coming from, a difficult childhood and a wounded position, and then that kind of moving you into the area, that's a well-worn path, isn't it? That I think most people in, the mental health area, will understand. You talked a lot around kind of rituals in terms of getting older, and I know that is part of your work. Could you maybe say a little bit more, explain what you mean a little bit more for our listeners?
Of course, yeah, that sense of in Western culture in particular, and especially contemporary living, there's no real mark for when you step into adulthood for adolescents. You get a sort of cognitive graduation, if you like. Well done, you've passed your exams. Here's your certificate, which is wonderful, and it's important to celebrate that. But there's so many elements of growing older and becoming into adulthood that are missed. That sense of transition, that sense of, leaving something behind and having to step into a new space. And I think that traditional educational models don't support young people through those processes. There is the mental growth, there is the cognitive growth, but what about emotional and spiritual, and that sense of your physicality changing? And so rituals and rites of passage because mine were unconventional, became something I became really interested in, that sense of, okay, so when did I become an adult? And through studying performing arts, I was given an amazing platform to explore that, like that sense of, oh my gosh, I can be these different characters and I can embody their lived experiences through being the character and make sense of my own journey through going through that process, and seeing the stage as a place of transition, as a place of liminality, and the space in between, these kind of areas of ritual. And that became really important to me in the work that I did. It took me a while to get there. I was in tourism management for 8 years, and it was actually a trip to South America that sort of changed the course of my path and changed the course of my life and brought me back to where I had been as a teenager in performing arts, using drama and creativity to explore who I am. And what a great tool to get you out of your head and into more creative ways of being, especially for young people.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, it's an amazing tool, isn't it? And I guess the ability to, to sit inside different parts of yourself. I mean, or in terms of different characters, there's a strong underpinning, already where there's an underpinning of kind of Jungian psychology in what we're talking about, which we will come to, but it's a really, really expansive approach, isn't it? That there's a space where people could be creative, where they can explore, it's not limited by thinking. I guess, it is a really, really, healing and transformative kind of space. I mean, I'm just rewinding a little bit. South America, so that was a very important for you. Could you maybe say a little bit more around, what that meant and what your experiences were? Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. So I was just coming into what I consider, the Saturn return. I'm really into astrology. And, there's this element of when you come into 28, 29, where huge shifts in your life start to happen on an unconscious level. And I'd been in tourism management for 8 years, and I was so lost and bored, and I felt like there was a part of me really dying. And I decided to take a sabbatical, and I was very lucky. My manager at the time supported my sabbatical to go to South America. And to begin with, it was just, okay, I'm going to go backpacking and I'm going to see what happens there. But I was really, like, the people I met, the experiences that I had, they just were life transforming. And in particular, I was in Bolivia, working in an animal sanctuary in the middle of the Bolivian rainforest.
Wow.
With an adolescent puma. And this is when adolescence came back to me. It didn't come back to me in human form. It came back to me in animal form. And that whole experience of supporting this young adolescent creature through her journey brought me back to my pathway. It was almost like I've gone on this trajectory, and I now understand where I need to be. And I was reading my old journals, and I could see that. It was like, that was the moment where I went, no, I don't want to be a tourism manager anymore. And thankfully, the universe listened, and, we were all made redundant. So when I went home, the contract came to an end, and I had a bit of freedom to think about what I was going to do next. And so it was really, really transforming.
Yeah, and the work in the Bolivian rainforest with the puma, I mean, goodness me, I don't know, it really creates a strong emotional reaction in me. It must have been incredible, really. I mean, to work with, I mean, goodness me, you're so close to the natural world, aren't you? You're in the Bolivian rainforest, you're working with an adolescent puma. I mean, it must have been a beautiful experience.
It was intoxicating in terms of sensory, because you have that physical animal, and you have this incredibly alive space, which is the jungle. The jungle is noisy. It's a really noisy place, and there's so many creatures and animals there. We had monkeys in the sanctuary, and so one of the journeys in the morning is that you would have meat in your rucksack for your puma. So you'd have to run through the jungle with these monkeys chasing you because they'd want the meat.
Yeah.
And, you know, that sense of just being really physical and being very present.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I learned from the experience was presence. Because in order to be in that experience, you had to always be present, because you had to be aware of what this animal was doing. You had to be aware of the dangers in the jungle. You know, you have poisonous snakes, you have terrifying spiders. And so everything is about this sense of presence. But I had this really key moment where when you're kind of in the jungle, you know, you're grabbing onto trees and you're having to run. And every now and then you would hit a spiky tree. They'd be like these really thorny trees. And you think, oh, I keep making these mistakes. And then there's this one moment, and I can't pinpoint when it happened, where you no longer grab the spiky trees. It's like you have found the rhythm and the flow of the jungle, and you are no longer separate from it. You were just part of it. So you're out there and you are not, you know, it's not Mary-Rita in the jungle. It's just the jungle experience. So that was like, that was really wow at the time, you know, like, oh my God, I'm not thinking anymore. I'm not thinking anymore.
Yeah, and you know, we could use so many different ways to describe that. You know, peak experience will be one, but it's transcendent, really. I mean, I guess in many ways you kind of move up into a different state of consciousness, maybe arguably a more authentic state, really, of consciousness. You're out of thinking, you're one with everything that's around you. You know, I mean, returning more arguably to, you know, your true natural state, really. Yeah. And just looking at, you know, what you said about your kind of pathway so far, you know, underpinning this seems to be quite a lot of synchronicity going on. I don't know, when you look back, whether could you maybe say a little bit more around what you see?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Luna, which was the name of the puma, and bless her, she's no longer with us. She died a couple of years ago, but she was the kind of catalyst, if you like, to realizing that the support I wanted to give was within kind of adolescence. And that was the beginning of the journey. And then coming back to a redundancy opened up an opportunity for me to expand where I wanted to go. And so I started again. So I started working in a children's home and within a learning community, a learning support. And that was for 2 years. And as I was on that journey, I applied to a university in Derby to do creative expressive therapies. And that was the beginning of going back to drama and going back to performing arts, but not as a performance tool, but as a therapeutic tool. And it was almost like, that was the piece of the puzzle that I didn't have. I'd done the performing arts element. I'd gone on the tourism management journey, and now I was coming back to the performing arts, but with a completely different lens. And then doing that creative expressive therapies just opened up the transpersonal for me, and a very big synchronistic event where I started to become fascinated by masks. And a friend of mine was working with a mask maker, and she had to move to Italy to do a project on a refugee forum out there. And so she said to me, I can't do this project. I would really love if you could take it off my hands. And that moment was when I found my mentor for my dissertation, which opened up mask work, and also was my first encounter with transpersonal psychology. And I had not even considered mask work at the time. And so I'd gone on this creative expressive journey. I was going to explore something on a dramatic lens, but meeting this mentor just changed my whole trajectory again. And all of a sudden I had somebody who supported my mask making. He showed me how to make a mask. He created a cast on my own face. And I used that mask then to explore absence, the presence of absence through mask for my dissertation. And then I found the transpersonal, because it was the transpersonal story of the mask that absolutely fascinated me. And almost, again, that's that next level.
Yeah. it's almost as if all of the experiences, and goodness me, you have so much experience in so many different areas. It all came together really, and kind of there's a confluence really, and then led you into kind of the transpersonal and what you do now. I mean, for our listeners, could you say a little bit more about what it is, kind of creative, expressive arts therapies? What are they? I mean, what do they look like? Yeah.
So thinking of all kind of art mediums, so art, music, dance, drama, you have the technical and skill element of all of these tools. But when you start to think about them as creative expressive models, the product isn't important. It's the process. And that is one of the key elements of creative expressive therapies. It's the process. It doesn't matter what you create. It doesn't need to be perfect. And often when somebody comes into a creative expressive workshop, they want to stay within the lines. They've been trained through a certain type of education system that says, I need to create something. It needs to be a product at the end.
Yeah.
So creative expressive therapies removes the product and focuses on the process. And so all art making becomes process. So you can create a theatre piece. It doesn't need to be performed in front of an audience. It's just the lived experience of the performance within your little group. Or you can create an artwork that's messy and, is allowing you to open up to the unconscious, into the creative spaces, into the imaginal, into those elements. And so I see it as a vehicle that connects the ego to the unconscious and potentially beyond, because it removes the rules. And that's the problem, isn't it? Art and creativity has rules.
Yeah.
And when I was doing my masters, theatre started on the streets. It started, it didn't start behind a velvet curtain. This was, ritual. It was invoking gods. It was this sense of bringing forth the unconscious, the parts that, we don't understand through the model of theatre. And so that's one of my missions really, is to bring all of these models back to the streets, to take away the conditions and the regulations and the product, if you like. So
yeah, and a strong element of social construction, having to, I mean, I guess that's our programming from birth, isn't it? We have to stay in the socially constructed lines, and we have to think, and we have to do this, and we have to do that, but accessing the transpersonal realm, through expressive arts, it just breaks down those kind of barriers, doesn't it? I mean, in my therapy, sometimes I might use kind of active imagination, and that is similar, isn't it? I think, you kind of move from, a kind of really fairly rigid, socially constructed ego state and access the unconscious. And wow, I mean, the unconscious has a lot to say, doesn't it? I mean, it's really, really fascinating. I mean, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Mysterym. Could you tell us a little bit, about what it is and,
Yeah, of course. So after completing my master's, one of my research was with adolescents going through becoming an adult during the pandemic. So it was like that passage through the pandemic. And I used mask, ritual, and storytelling to explore their experiences. And it was profound. It was truly profound what was discovered there. And I am going to be turning my dissertation into an article this year. It's something I'm working on at the moment. And so working with that liminal space, another wonderful synchronicity of Jung's Red Book, which my husband gave me for my 40th birthday, just in time for when I was going into working in this realm and with my research. And I randomly opened a page because I was looking, I was working with an organic research model that's all about being with the intuitive. Randomly opened a page and it was all about Mysterym and that space in between where you meet the archetypes and you meet the higher consciousness.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I love that word. And so, what I say is Mysterym. So it is a play on Mysterym, but it's the mystery that I want to create through my own model. And so that's what it came from. The spaces in between the liminal, bringing clients into a conscious relationship with their story.
Yeah.
That's where, Mysterym started. And I love as well that within Mysterym, it has my initials, the MRM. And also, some people see Mystery M. So, what is that M? It is the mystery, it is the momentum, it is the magic. So it has these lovely levels that kind of have emerged in a transpersonal way. I often say, I didn't create Mysterym. I'm just the vehicle. I'm just a conduit to allow it to come into being in the world. And I just feel really grateful to have that experience, really.
Yeah, and that really imbues your story, doesn't it? Almost like, I mean, not all our listeners will probably resonate with this, but almost being led through, through synchronicity to meet people, to have experiences, to be led on a path that, that has brought you a lot of joy and has, clearly helped a lot of people. I mean, with Mysterym, that the mission statement, conscious and rebellious thinking for times of personal, rebellious and collective change. I mean, I thought that was absolutely wonderful. I mean, could you maybe say a few words about it?
Yes, of course. So, we are a thinking culture. We are, we're always in our heads. And I also think that since the pandemic, we've just gone back to normal, but there is no normal. Things have changed. And I think it's really important for these conversations to start happening. And I find that consciously stepping into your story allows you to really look at that, to look at what has happened, and to allow for the unconscious to maybe give you the language and the tools to say, that was really difficult. That was a difficult time. Let's not do things the way we've done them. Let's change the way we're doing things. Let's bring in more spirituality. Let's bring in more creativity, because we just have to look at, what's going on in the world. And there's that sense of a huge percentage of burnout. There's a huge percentage of people leaving their jobs or not knowing what they want to do next. And so that conscious and rebellious thinking is saying, okay, let's look at this through a different lens. Let's step into the story, but consciously, through creativity, through transpersonal lenses. And let's have those rebellious conversations that actually are uncomfortable. I don't feel like things have just gone back to normal. I feel that there's an undercurrent going on. And that's what that mission statement is about. It's about, can we talk about this undercurrent, or are we just going to continue? And when is that undercurrent going to implode or explode? And that's what it's about. It's about that real sense of, let's do things differently. And I think that on a personal level, it's needed, but also within the professional world, within education, within business, we need to start looking at the things that we offer and have those difficult and uncomfortable conversations through creativity and through transpersonal ways of being.
Yeah, I mean, I find myself absolutely agreeing with what you're saying. I mean, this is a big statement, but I mean, even just looking at ecology, looking at the state of the earth, I mean, arguably, humanity needs to access a higher state of consciousness in order to, one, empathize, with the world and what's going on, and two, create change, and arguably that is in the transpersonal space. And the transpersonal space is limited by social construction. So here we are. Yeah. And so I guess your work is really inviting people into that healing space, not only healing themselves, but arguably raising a level of consciousness and healing the planet. I think that's a big statement, but that's where the healing is, isn't it? It's in the transpersonal realm, but the transpersonal realm is one that has not been looked on favorably by, by society, certainly Western society.
I agree. And I think as well, another one of my missions is this, to the streets, bringing it to the streets.
Yeah.
Bringing transpersonal to the streets is really important to me, because I think it is trapped in the academic world. It's trapped within that kind of academic lens. And there are so many people, so many movements trying to bring those conversations. And I'm part of some of those conversations. And through my masters and the people, some of the lecturers and supervisors on the master's program, they're doing incredible work to change that language. because it is beyond, it's not just about the scientific element of transpersonal psychology. It is about the applied transpersonal psychology in our world, in our classrooms, in our business, in our lives, because it is important, like you say, especially when we think about the ecology of the planet and that beyond personal. This isn't just about us anymore. And a friend of mine used the word sacred pause for the pandemic. And, you know, that several people saw that as a moment to really look at themselves or look at the world. But what is happening now to continue those conversations, that we don't fall and slip back into the way things were.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, sacred pause, I've never heard that before, but yeah, I mean, that really fits, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, a time for change. And I guess, you know, a lot of people have changed, you know, in lots of different ways because of that sacred pause. But yeah, arguably society just rolls on, doesn't it?
Yes.
You know, and that kind of needs to change. I mean, I really want to ask you about, you know, Jungian psychology and just your experience of it, and you know how you kind of bring it into your work. If that's okay, it's a massive subject, I know.
It is, yeah. So I was thinking about this because, like you said, Jung, you know, he's
it's
like, where do you
years,
start?
couldn't we? Yeah.
We could, yeah. But I think that what spoke to me very early on in my life, and I would say, you know, possibly because I ended up on a very unconventional route, is the archetypal world, the archetypal realm. You know, from a very young age, I discovered tarot, and I was just fascinated by these images that spoke to something inside me that wasn't rational. And yet I was able to draw on those images and really find purpose and path through just, you know, contemplating or writing about that particular image. And so the archetype sort of came in first. And then I think Jung came through with the tarot, but also then later through the creative expressive therapies degree. And then most definitely during the transpersonal psychology masters. And I would say it really is the collective unconscious, which is incredibly transpersonal in its way of being, the archetypal realm. I am at the moment going through a course to become a Jungian depth coach, which is
fantastic.
And it's incredible. I'm halfway through. And it's all around using creative process to access active imagination, the imaginal realm, archetypal worlds, mythology. And that's what, you know, I love about Jung, is that, you know, at the time it must have been really difficult for him because he was coming from a rational scientific space. And, you know, the delay of the publication of the Red Book is really interesting. And I love that eventually his family were gifted us this amazing treasure, you know, where Jung is a mystic. You know, there's this huge element of Jung of being a mystic and using dreams and using, you know, the unconscious through paints and through artwork to bring forth what was in the concealed, what was in the concealed. And I guess those areas of Jung have fascinated me. You know, I've done work on that level with the anima and the animus and that sense of the inner masculine. That was a huge part of my journey on my masters, of activating the inner masculine and having a relationship through using Jungian ideas in that way. And yeah, I think his work is phenomenal. And, you know, and on the back of Jung, you know, we had James Hillman and his archetypal psychology, where he wanted to take psychology out of the clinical realm and bring the gods back and bring, you know, one of the things I loved about James Hillman, I studied him in my master's, is that, you know, capital letters for feelings, you know, rather than this sense, he was like, everything is, you know, the capital letter has been removed. And by doing that, you take away its power and you take away its elements. It just becomes a part of the paragraph. But, you know, you have that capital letter for, you know, even light or compassion, always with a capital C. And all of a sudden it changes the energy of the word. And so that sense of the archetypal realm is incredibly powerful and important to me and my work.
Yeah, I mean Hillman and Jung, Jung's so far ahead of his time, really. Freud accused him of being a mystic, didn't he? But there was no area of humanity that was off limit for Jung. I mean, Jung explored everything. I mean, he was a remarkable man. I mean, just personal story. I had a bit of an odyssey once too. I was in Switzerland and I went to Bollingen. I'm a Jung super fan. I love Jung's work. Yeah, and I went to his house in Bollingen. It was so incredible, and I I knocked on the door. There was somebody there, and it was his granddaughter. And his granddaughter
wow!
let me into the house, and I looked around the house. I saw Philemon. I saw the bedroom. I went into on the Memory Dreams Reflections. There's his kind of his study. She took me into the study. Oh my God, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. Anyway, that was one of the highlights of my life. It's so sacred to me, But I mean, just kind of bringing it back to the kind of work you do every day. I mean, if someone was to approach you for kind of transformational coaching, do you work with individuals? Do you work with groups? What does it look like?
Yeah, with both. And Mysterym has been going now since September. And, I have had quite a range of different types of clients. But what's really interesting is the adolescent kind of world is shifting into more the kind of later rites of passage. So a lot of the clients I'm working with are in that second Saturn return, so coming into 60. And, exploring what it means to go into the elder years. That seems to be where my work is really calling people at the moment. But I think that the work that I do is about those transitional moments in life where, there's a sense of searching for purpose and meaning. It might be coming to the end of a job, an end of a relationship, into a new age or a new stage. And so it is that moment to just step into the space in between. What is between here and there? And what can be transformed when we bring those explorations and that curiosity to the edge of the unknown. So that's the work that I'm doing. I'm working with some groups on using transpersonal storytelling. And that sense of, consciously stepping into your story as a group. Also public speaking, so that sense of what is your story when you are speaking in front of people? What is the story that you want to share? And so I think the most important thing about Mysterym is it allows my clients to go into the space in between and just take a moment to see what are those tools and what is the quest they want to then take forward into the next stage.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. And just to pick up on one kind of age group of the clients. Yeah, I mean, so the midlife, people that are in 60, I'm thinking about the social construction around aging, in the Western world, particularly, it's not great, is it? But so you're opening up a space and, you're allowing them to enter into that space in order to find personal meaning for the last stage of their life. I mean, that is really, really important work. I mean, it must be amazing. I mean, to see some of the clients really step into that space at 60, especially in Western society, after years of conditioning that once you're at 60, your life's over, you're invisible, etc., etc. I mean, it must be amazing work.
And it is, and it's incredible. And I've met just so many amazing people who just defy and rebel against that narrative as well. And I feel really lucky because they've given so much already, and then they're stepping into the what I would see as the elder years. And that's the difference, isn't it? And this has been really important to me, the difference between being old and being an elder. I've been so lucky. I live out in the Middle East, and I've met incredible women who have supported me on my journey, and they are elders within their, within business and within professional world. And they are paying it forward by supporting me and some of my kind of peers to go on our journey. And I feel so blessed to have that, because it's been incredible to learn from the elders in our community. And that comes back to rite of passage.
Yeah.
Our adolescents don't have that. They don't have the elders kind of bringing them into what it means to be an adult. The world seemed very separate.
Yeah, I mean the difference in meaning between, you know, kind of older person and elder, you know, I mean it's, yeah, I mean I guess it's a return to kind of, I don't know, kind of, I guess kind of indigenous societies still have this, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, rites of passage, you know, unfortunately we've lost that, you know, and it's so important, you know, and there is a returning back, isn't there? I mean, a few episodes ago I interviewed a shamanic healer, and you know, and the kind of knowledge that has been lost, I think, is coming back, you know, and it's about time, you know, because the earth and society really need that knowledge. You know, rites of passage is part of it. We're kind of running out of time. I just wanted to ask you one more thing. I wanted to explore the masks a little bit more. I'm rewinding a lot. Could you say a little bit more about the masks and storytelling?
Yes. Yeah. So the mask has played an interesting part. So for my dissertation in my undergraduate, I created a mask from the cast of my own face. And it was really interesting. I didn't know what my question was until I saw my own face, because we don't see our face in the way that others do, like the facsimile. The facsimile. And it was interesting because I saw my father. And, you know, my father was absent from my life. And so the question that emerged from the mask was, okay, what is the presence of absence? Because when something isn't there, it still has a huge influence on who we become. And so I used the mask not to explore my father as the human being, and not even as the archetype, but beyond, and looking at the archetype of absence. And so the mask became the tool that allowed me to almost see the absence and to understand it. And after that, I saw the transpersonal potential of masks, because it allows for a completely new lens of experience. You know, I went back to my childhood through this mask. And then for my research in my master's, my co-researchers created masks, but what they did is create archetypal masks to support them through the pandemic. And they were incredible. That, you know, that some of them were, you know, those typical archetypes like princess or, you know, fool, but some were just these new, where they were beyond gender and they were just this kind of energetic. And that's what I realized that the mask is capable of. It holds an energy.
Yeah.
And Keith Johnston, you know, who passed away this week at 90, his work informed me so much in that mask as possession. So when you wear a mask, are you wearing the mask, or is the mask wearing you?
Oh, how interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I could talk to you for hours, you know, but we're coming to the end. So at the end of all of our kind of podcasts, we always ask our guests their go-to coping strategies for, you know, for retaining good kind of mental health. I mean, what would you say? What do you do?
Oh, for me, I have two. One is journaling. I find that writing down my experiences really helps. And one is story sharing. I'm very blessed to have incredible people in my life that I can go for a walk with, and we can share our stories. And that, for me, because it comes back to what we said at the beginning of being seen.
Yeah.
And when I share, I have an amazing friend that lives here with me, and we've known each other for over 17 years. Actually went to South America together. Now she lives here, and we walk together and we share stories. And I find that story sharing allows you to be seen and heard. And that can have a huge impact on how you feel about yourself and your mental health.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, if people want to get hold of you, you know, and to explore the kind of work that you offer, how do they do it? How do they get hold of you?
So I have a website. So can I give you all the details for the website?
Yeah, definitely. We'll share all of your details on our social media platforms.
Yes. And I have a LinkedIn page as well, so that will give a bit of a sense of some of the work I've done in the past. But yeah, it's mymysterym.com. And, you know, at the moment, the services are just booked through a connection call. And then, you know, I do both in-person and online sessions.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I just want to thank you, Mary-Rita. It's been an absolutely fascinating show. And thank you so much for your time. And it's been really nice to meet you.
The same. Thank you so much for inviting me on, Mark. And I hope that this was useful.
Thank you.